All right. Now we are in the next study case chapter 14 with the title of Pennsylvania's Unemployment Compensation Modernization System. All right. So before we dive into our main discussion today, I want to look at these two questions. These are the big picture questions that the OCMS case study forces us to think about. Like, uh, first questions is the what challenge arise in large-scale public sector IT projects, and why do IS implementations often fail despite significant investment? And think about the unique challenge in the government projects, like the political pressure or the public scrutiny is everyone is watching, and if a private company's project fails, only the investors care, and if a government project fails, every taxpayer cares. Okay, and then in this question is also talking about the changing leadership, how the elections happened, and then the people who started the project might not be there to finish it. The new leaders might have the new priorities, those kind of things. And these also about the complex rules where the government has to follow many laws and the regulations while the IT system has to handle all of them. Okay, and this in this case it includes a lot of multiple stakeholders. So many different groups have to say, like different agencies, different levels of government, different vendors, those kind of things. Okay, and the second questions, why do they fail despite insignificant investment? We um we read the second questions. How do project management and IT governments influence the success of the failure of IT project? And what lessons can be learned from the UCMS case for the future implementation? This is the frustrating part. You would think that with enough money you could solve any problems, right? But the UCMS case shows us that money alone is not enough. They fail because they got a poor planning, weak management, unclear requirement, bad testing, lack of oversight, those kind of things. So money cannot always fix any of those things if the foundation is not solid. Okay, and what is the project management in this case? It's the discipline of planning, organizing, and managing resources to complete a specific goal. It's about the timelines, it's about the budget, the tasks, and the people. And in the UCMS case, project management was weak. No one was really in charge. No one was tracking progress properly. No one was catching the problems early. So how about the IT governance here? The IT governance is the system of rules, the practices, and the processes that ensure the IT supports the organization's goal. It's about decision making, it's about the accountability and the oversight. In the UCMS case, governance was almost non existent. There were no clear performance metric. The audit findings were ignored. No one was held accountable. So, how would these two things influence success or failure? Well, the good project management keep things on track. The bad project management lets things drift. Okay? The good IT government ensures the right people are making the right decisions. How about the bad one? The bad one means chaos and waste. In the UCMS case, both were bad. That's why the project failed. Okay, this is what we will discuss today. But you need some hints about this case. Okay, like we need experienced managers who understand both technology and the organization. We also need clear goals and metrics from day one. We also need an oversight and accountability at every level. We also need to test early and test often the system. Then the last one is we need to listen to audit findings and act on them. Okay, so as we begin our discussions today, keep these questions in mind. Think about the UCMS case and ask yourself, if you had been in charge, what would you have done differently? What systems would you have put in place to prevent this disaster? Okay, let's start this study case. Okay, and this is the articles of the sorry, Pennsylvania's. Okay, so you can have some times to read it first. I will put it in the iLearning for you to read, and then after that we can uh start the explanation. Okay. Okay, are you ready to discuss? We will explore and analyze this case together. Okay, let's look at this background first. The story so far, the reason, the background, why the Pennsylvania even started this whole project in the first place. Okay, Pennsylvania used an outdated legacy system for unemployment compensation. Now, when we say legal system in IT, we don't just mean old. We mean it's a system that has been running for a very, very long time, sometimes decades, and it's often based on technology that is no longer widely used. And in this case, we're talking about a mainframe system that was over 40 years old, like maybe your phone. Okay, if you try to use a phone from 1980s today, what would happen? You cannot download app, you cannot connect to 5G, the battery will die immediately. Yeah, that's really show those kind of things. Okay, that's exactly the problem that this government Pennsylvania had. Okay, the system was difficult to maintain and inefficient. Because it was so old, finding programmers who even understood that old computer language was hard and expensive. If they wanted to add a new feature or fix a bug, it took forever because the system was rigid and inflexible. It couldn't keep up with the needs of the modern citizens. A modernization initiative was launched to improve the service. Okay, and then the government realized, okay, we cannot keep doing this. We're wasting money and we're giving citizens a bad service. They decided they need to do something big. And then they launched a project, a massive IT project to fix this. And the goal is to replace the outdated system with modern integrated system. This is the dream, right? They wanted to build a brand new system, one that was fast, reliable, and could talk to other systems easily. The integrated, okay, means all the different parts, like the parts can connect to each other, okay? So that was the background. The state knew they had a problem. and they set a clear goal to fix it. It sounds simple, right? But as we'll see in the next slides, it didn't go according to plan. Okay. Okay, we established that Pennsylvania had a really old system and they wanted to build a new one. Okay, why exactly was the old system so bad? The legacy system was very old. First of all, legacy system was very old. We touched this before. This system was over 40 years old. Can anyone here name something that is 40 years old already and still work perfectly? No, exactly. Yeah. Technology moves fast. A 40 years old computer system is like a car from 1980s. No GPS, no Bluetooth, no backup camera. It it just doesn't have the features we expect today. And then the second one is the high maintenance cost. This is the big one. Imagine owning a vintage car. It looks cool, right? But when it breaks down, you cannot just go to any mechanic. You have to find a specialist who know how to fix it. And those parts normally, they are rare and expensive, right? It's the same with the old software. The programmers who understand that old code are few and far between, so they charge a lot of money. Pennsylvania was spending millions of dollars just to keep the old system running, not improving it, just keeping it from completely crashing. That's not a good use of taxpayer money, right? And then the slow processing time. This affects real people. When someone loses their job, they need that unemployment money as soon as possible to pay rent, to buy food, right? But with this old system, processing a claim could take weeks. Why? Because the system was slow. It was like waiting for a website to load very, yeah, it's completely slow. Okay, it was a huge problem. And then the fourth problem is that it's difficult to update or to modify. This is a very classic problem with the legacy system. Let's say that the government passed a new law changing how unemployment benefits are calculated. With a modern system, you might be able to update that with just a few clicks or simple code change, right? However, with this old system, well, it might take months of work, and it's like trying to renovate a house, but the walls are made of solid concrete. So every change is huge. It's totally expensive project. And the last one, it's poor user experience. This is the result of all the other problems. Imagine you are a worker who just lost your job, and then you are stressed, you are worried about money, and you have to use a website or a phone system that is confusing, that is slow and constantly crashes. How would you feel? Yeah, frustrated, right? And angry. The system was designed for the computers of the 1970s something, not for people in the 21st centuries, okay? It was not user friendly at all. So, to put all this together, it's high cost, low speed, impossible to update, and a terrible experience for citizens. That a recipe for disaster. That's why the modernizations was absolutely necessary. The old system wasn't just old, it was actively failing the people it was supposed to serve. Alright, so now we know the old system was terrible. uh, expensive, slow, and hated by everyone who had just used it. Okay, so the state decided to fix it with a new project called Unemployment Compensation Modernization System. Okay, or we can say UCMS for short. And these slides will tell us what the project was supposed to achieve. Okay, first of all, replace the old legacy system. This is the foundation of everything. They didn't just want to patch up the old system or add a few new features, they want to rip out the old engine and put it in a brand new one. Okay, the goal was to get rid of all of the problems we just talked about. Okay, and then second one is to improve the claim processing speed and accuracy. Remember how we talk about people waiting weeks for their money? This objective directly addresses that. They wanted to make the system faster so that when someone lost their job, they got their first payment quickly. But it's not just about speed, it's also about the accuracy. The old system made mistakes. It might calculate your benefit amount wrong or lose your paperwork. And the new system was supposed to be precise and error free. And also the faster and more accurate. That's the dream. Okay. So it's also supposed to support federal and state reporting requirements. This is very important. The state government has to report to the federal government about how many people are unemployed, how much money is being paid out, and so on and so on. The old system made this reporting difficult and slow. The new system was designed to automatically generate these reports, making it easier for the state to follow the law and get the funding they need. And the final point is to enhance the service for claimants and the employers. The claimant, the claimants are the workers who lost their jobs and are applying for benefits, while the employers are the businesses who pay taxes to fund the unemployment system. Both groups interact with the system. The goal was to make their experience better. For example, for claimants, makes the website that is easy to use, a phone system that doesn't just keep you on hold for hours, and clear communication about your claim. Meanwhile, for the employers, it means an easy way to pay their taxes and report their employees. It's about treating them like customers, not just case numbers. So, in summary, the project has four goals: the new system, faster and more accuracy processing, better reporting, and happier users. Okay, these all sounds great, right? Okay, unfortunately, as we'll see, having good goals is not enough. You also need good execution. All right, so we know what they wanted to build. Now let's talk about who was supposed to build it. Okay, this is actually one of the most important slides because it hints at why the project became so complicated. Okay, first of all, the project owned by the Commonwealth of the Pennsylvania. This meant that the project belonged to the state government. They were the customer, they were paying the bills, and they were the ones who would ultimately use the system. If you hire a contractor or renovate your house, you are the owner of the renovation project, right? You decide what you want, you pay for it, and you have to live with the result. So in this case, the Pennsylvania was the homeowner in this situation. Okay. Now it start tricky in this case. Even though the Pennsylvania owned the project, many different groups has a stake in its success. Okay, first of all, the state agency. It different departments within the government. Okay, the departments of labor and industry was the main one, but the other agencies might have been involved too. Maybe the IT department, the finance, or the legal department. And each of these agencies had different needs and different priorities. The finance department cared about cost, the legal department cared about following the law, and getting all these groups to agree was like herding cats. All right. And then the second stakeholders is the IT vendors. These are the outside companies that hire to do the actual work. But in this case, the main vendor was IBM. They were the experts brought in to build the system. But sometimes there are multiple vendors. Like one company might write the software, and another might provide the servers, and then another might handle the training. Okay, so each vendor has their own goals, their own schedules, and their own profit margins. They don't always put the state's interest first. And the next stakeholder is the program administrators. These are the people who would actually use the system every day. They are the ones processing the claims, answering the phones, and managing the unemployment program. They know how the work actually gets done. They have valuable insight, but they're often left out of high level meetings. The system doesn't work for them. The whole project fails. Okay? So imagine trying to plan a group vacation. You have five friends. One wants to go to the beach, one wants to go to the mountains, and one is on a tight budget. One wants a luxury, and one doesn't care as long as there's a good food. So it's really hard, right, to make everyone happy. Okay, so that's the Pennsylvania was dealt with. The state owned the project, but they had to balance the need of the multiple agencies, manage the vendors they hired, and satisfy the program and administrator who would actually use the system. If any of this group wasn't happy, the project could run into a trouble. Yeah, as we know, it did. All right, everyone. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. These slides will give you the high-level summary of how the project was actually carried out. And honestly, this is where we start to see the red flags. Okay, first of all, the large-scale IT modernization project. This is the fancy way of saying this was a huge deal. We're not talking about updating a website or building a simple mobile app. We're talking about replacing a system that handled millions of workers and hundreds of thousands of employers. The scale is massive. In the IT world, when a project is this big, the risk of failure automatically goes up. Why? Because there are so many moving parts. It's like the difference between uh baking and catering wedding, okay, for 500 people. It's totally cannot go wrong, okay? And that multi-year development process. The project was not going to be finished in a few months. It was planned to take years. And when a project stretches over multiple years, a lot can change, and the people involved might leave. The technology might become outdated, the laws might change, so it's hard to keep momentum and focus over such a long period. The next one, the significant investment of public funds. This is taxpayer money we're talking about. Hundreds of millions of dollars. When a private company fails, its investors lose money. When a government project fails, the public loses money. And unlike a private company, the government cannot just go bankrupt or walk away. They have to answer to the citizen. This creates a lot of pressures, and there's a pressures to show a progress, pressures to spend the money wisely, and pressures to deliver the result. And then sometimes the pressure leads to bad decisions. And finally, the most important points about the system launch before all issues were resolved. This is the classic mistakes in IT project. It's called a premature launch. Imagine your uh, chef and then you have a big dinner service tonight. You know the soup is a little too salty and the steak is slightly undercooked and then the dessert is not set properly, but the customer are waiting and the manager is pressuring you to start serving. What would you could do? So in Pennsylvania's case, they launched parts of the system, specifically phase two, even though they knew there were still problems. Software defects, data issues, processing errors. They knew about them, but they launched anyway. Why? Yeah, probably because of the pressure. They were behind the schedule. They are over budget and they need to show something for all that money. But here's the problem. Launching a broken system doesn't fix it. It just means the public gets to experience the brokenness. So, to summarize all that we have talking about, these slides, it was a huge project. It took many years, it cost a lot of money, and they made the critical mistakes of launching before it was actually ready. Okay, these slides will talking about something start to go wrong. We have talking about the goals, the stakeholders, the implementation plan. Now let's look at what actually happened. These are the major challenges that derailed the entire project. The project delays beyond the original schedule. Remember the original timeline? The system was supposed to be fully finished by February 2010. But remember what happened? The contract ended in 2013 and the system was still not done. We're talking about 45 months behind the schedule. That's almost 4 years late. Okay. The second is the cost exceeded initial budget estimates. The original contract with IBM uh, was for 109.9 millions, but by the end, the state had paid nearly $170 million to IBM alone, and the total cost with all the follow-up fixes was over $180 million. That's tens of millions of dollars more than planned. Okay, and then it complete testing before system deployment. This is a huge one. Remember earlier we talked about how they launched phase 2 even though they knew there were problems? This is exactly what that means. In software development, testing is like quality control. You would not buy a phone that has been tested to make sure the screen doesn't crack and the battery doesn't explode, right? Well, the Pennsylvania launched part of the system without doing proper testing, and it was reported that 50% of the serious bugs were not discovered until the very end during something called user acceptance testing. That's like, it's completely a disaster. And it's a weak project and vendor management. This might be the most important challenge of all. Remember how we talk about the stakeholders, the people who were supposed to be managing this project, the state employees didn't have the experience of the staff to do it properly. They essentially let the IBM manage itself. There was no one at there being held accountable. No one was double checking the IBM's work, and no one was making sure the project stayed on track. That's what happened here. IBM made mistakes, but Pennsylvania failed to manage the IBM. And when you're spending hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars, weak management is not just a mistake, it's a failure of responsibility. Okay, so after all that money, all those years, and all those problems, what did Pennsylvania actually end up with? Okay, so this slide shows us the limitation of the system they built, the things it couldn't do well. Okay, first of all, the UCMS does not fully support all the unemployment programs. Remember that the unemployment system is not just one simple thing. There are different programs for different situations. Okay, there's regular unemployment for people who lost their jobs, and there might be extended benefits during a recession. There are special programs for things like disaster relief or pandemic assistance. The new system was supposed to handle all of these programs seamlessly, but it didn't. Some programs just weren't built into the system properly. So when a claimant came in with a situation that didn't fit the normal mold, the system couldn't handle it. And some process still require manual workarounds. This is really important concept in IT. A workaround is a temporary fix, a way to get something done even though the system is not working properly. But when workarounds become permanent, that's a problem. So because UCMS didn't fully support all program, the employees using it had to find other ways to get the job done. Maybe they had to print out forms and fill them out by hand. Maybe they had to use separate older system for certain claims. Maybe they had to call another department to get information their system should have provided automatically. So employees has to keep using old processes alongside with the new system, which defeated the whole purpose of the modernization. And the final is the system complexity creates the operational inefficiencies. This sounds technical, but it's actually simple. The system was so complicated that it's actually made work harder instead of easier. Remember, the goal of the new system is to make things faster, simpler, and more efficient. But because the UCMS was poorly designed and full of defects, it has the upside effect. Employees have to click through more screens, wait longer for things to load, and deal with confusing interfaces. The task that should have taken minutes, it took hours. Okay, so the system have some limitation, like it was incomplete, it required manual workarounds, it was inefficient, those kind of things. And the worst part, when the pandemic hit in 2020 and millions of people needed unemployment benefit, this broken system couldn't handle the load. The people of the Pennsylvania paid for a solution, but what they got was a new set of problems. Okay, now let's talk about the human side of this disaster. We have talked about the money, the delays, and then the technical problems. But who actually suffered because of this failure? The answer is the people who have to use the system every single day, the staff. And this slide shows us how the new system affected the employees who were supposed to be helped with it. Okay. And first of all, the staff faced difficulties learning and using the system. Imagine you have been doing your job the same way for 10 or 20 years. You know the old system, you know its quirk, its shortcuts, its workarounds. You're efficient. And then one day your boss says, here's a brand new system. Learn it. And then now, if the new system is well designed and intuitive, that transition might be okay. But remember, the UCMS was complex, full of defects, and poorly tested. So instead of being easy to learn, it was confusing, it was frustrating. Think about your grandparents trying to use a new smartphone. It's totally confusing, right? And then the second one is the increased workload because of the manual processing. This is really important point. The whole point of automation is to reduce the manual work. A computer should handle the repetitive tasks so that humans can focus on the complicated stuff. But remember, on the last slide, we talked about the manual workarounds because the system didn't work properly. The staff had to do things manually. They had to double check the system's work. They had to fill out the paper forms for claims the system couldn't process. And they had to call other offices to get the information that should have been shared automatically. So instead of reducing their workload, the new system increased it. They were doing their job, plus extra work to fix the system's mistake. And the last one, the impact on staff. The reduced productivity compared to expectations. When the new system was proposed, they probably promised, this will make your job so much easier. You will be able to process claims twice as fast. That was the expectation. But the reality was the opposite. Because the system was hard to use and required manual workarounds, staff become less productive, not more. They process fewer claims per day and they spend more time on each case. They were more tired and more frustrated at the end of the day. How about the impact on claimants? Well, now let's talk about the people outside the system, the claimant. Claimant is just regular person who lost their jobs. is applying for unemployment benefit. These are people who are already stressed because they don't have a paycheck coming in. They are worried about paying rent, buying food, and supporting their families. And now they have to deal with a broken system. Okay, now let's look at these three impact on the claimants. First of all, the delays. Yes, delays in claim processing. This is the most direct impact. Remember how we talked about the system being slow and requiring manual workarounds? That means it took much longer for a claim to go from submitted to approved and then to paid. Imagine you lose your job, you're already anxious about money, you file your claim online, expecting to get your first payment in week 1 or 2, but then week passes, 2 weeks, a month, still nothing. You call the police, but you cannot get through. You check online, but status hasn't changed. Meanwhile, your savings are running out, the bills are piling up. That's just not inconvenience. That's a crisis. And for many people, that delay could mean missing a rent payment or not being able to buy groceries. And this system that was supposed to be a safety net become a source of additional stress and reduce public confidence in system. This is even worse than delays. Sometimes payments didn't come at all, or they came late, or they came for the wrong amount, or the system would suddenly stop working in the middle of the processing of claim. This is so frustrating. And it's not about payments, it's about service. When claimants called for help, they couldn't get through because the phone lines were overwhelmed. When they visited offices, they found long lines and frustrated staff. The entire experience of interacting with the unemployment system became painful. And yes, public confidence. This is the long term damage. When people lost trust in the government service, it's hard to get the trust back. Imagine you're a worker who paid taxes into the employment unemployment system for years, thinking if I ever lose my job, this safety net will be there for me. And then you lose your job and the safety net fails you. You don't get your money on time, you cannot get help, you feel abandoned by the system you supported. So, what happens next? You tell your friends and family, you post about it on social media, you lose faith not just in the employment office, but maybe in government services in general. So, the next time someone proposes a new government program, you might think, why bother? They'll just mess it up. Okay? And this is what the reduced public confidence means. It's loss of trust that can last for generations. Alright, so we have talked about the impact on people, the staff, and the claimants. Now, let's talk about the money and the management. Because at the end of the day, this was not just technical failure, it was a financial and government's failure too. All right, so let's break this down into 3 points. It's the additional funding required after the implementation. Remember the original budget, the contract with the IBM was $109.9 million. But by the time the dust settled, the state has spent over $180 million. That's tens of millions of dollars more than planned. But the thing is, even after the system was supposedly done, they still needed more money to fix it. Okay, so where did this additional funding come from? All right, in 2013, the Pennsylvania legislature passed a law creating something called a Service Infrastructure Improvement Fund, or we can say in SIF. They authorized like 178.4 million. It's almost as much as the original project cost to improve the user service and systems. Okay, think about it for a moment. They already spent nearly 170 millions on the IBM, and then they authorized another 178 millions to clean up the mess. That's over $350 million in total, and the system still wasn't working properly. Inadequate oversight and accountability. This is a fancy way of saying no one was watching the store. Remember earlier we talked about weak project management? This is the same idea. But now we're looking at from a financial perspective. Who was making sure that the money was being spent wisely? Who was checking that the work was actually being done? Who was holding people accountable when things go wrong? The answer is no one. And the Carnegie Mellon report found that the DLI didn't have enough staff to oversee the contract. There was no normal delegations of roles and responsibilities. No one at DLI was held accountable for the failures. And that's what happened here. The state gave the IBM and other vendors hundreds of millions of dollars without proper oversight. And when the money was gone and the system was still broken, there was no one to hold it accountable. Okay. The last one, the prior audit findings were not fully addressed. This might be the most frustrating point of all. An audit is like a financial checkup, you know that, right? And auditors come in and then look at the book and say, okay, here are the problems we found, here's what you need to fix. Well, and then the auditors has been looking at the Pennsylvania's unemployment system for years. They had found the problems, they made the recommendations, and what did the state do? Well, not much. So the same thing here happened. Auditor found problems with how many was being spent, and then how the contracts were being managed, and how the systems were being overseen. But those findings were ignored or only partially fixed. So when the big crisis came, no one could say they didn't see it coming. All right, let's summarize this financial or governance issues. First of all, they need way more money than they originally planned. Right? Hundreds of millions more. And then there was no watching the money. No one watching the money. Oversight was weak or maybe non existent. And then the last one, they ignored the warning sign. The audit findings that could have prevented disaster were never fully addressed. And this is a classic case of pay me now, pay me later. And they could have spent money on proper oversight and fixing problems early. Instead, they spend much more money later cleaning up the disaster that should never have happened. And the worst part, it was all taxpayer money. Every dollar wasted was a dollar that could have gone to schools, to roads, and actually helping unemployed workers. That's why governance matter. That's why oversights matter. And when you are spending public money, you have a responsibility to spend it wisely. And yes, it's unfinished business. After hundreds of millions of dollars, after years of delays, after lawsuits and audits and investigations, the job still is not done. Okay? And these slides will give you four key points about where things stand. Okay. First of all, system is not fully modernized. Remember the original goal to replace the old, outdated system with a brand new, modern, integrated one. That was the dreams, right? But the reality, the system is still not fully modernized. They have part of a new system, but it's not complete. It's not the fully modernized system they promise. The old system is still being used for something. The new system is being used for others. It's a hybrid, and hybrids are often messy. Next one, further development and fixes are required. This means the work is not over. Even after all that time and money, they still need to do more development. They still need to fix bugs. They still need to add features that should have been there for from the beginning. Like, oh come on. The Pennsylvania paid for a finished system, but they got something that still needs years of additional work. And then stronger governance and project controls are needed. Yes, this is the lesson learned, or at least the lesson they are trying to learn. The governance, having the right people in charge, making sure everyone is doing their job and holding people accountable. Project controls here means having system in place to track the progress, manage the budgets, and catch problems early. And remember all the problems we talk about, the weak management, no oversight, ignoring the audit findings. That's what happens when the governance is weak. So now they are saying we need to do better. We need stronger rules, better oversight, and more accountability. Yeah. And the last one, risk or continued inefficiency if issues remain unresolved. This is warning. If they don't fix these problems, if they don't complete the modernization, if they don't strengthen governance, then inefficiencies will continue. What does that mean in practice? It means claims will still be delayed, staff will still be overworked, and claimants will still be frustrated, and money will still be wasted. The same problems that have blocked this project for years will just keep happening over and over. So let's summarize this one slide. The system is not finished. It's still a work in a progress. And then they need more work, more development, more fixes. They need better management, stronger rules, and stronger oversight. If they don't fix it, the problems will continue forever. This is the This is the sad conclusion of the UCMS case study. A project that started with so much promise, with a clear goal and a big budget, and then ended up as an unfinished business. And the people of the Pennsylvania are still waiting for the systems they were promised. We have been through the entire USCMS disaster together. We've seen the goals, the challenges, the impacts, and the unfinished business. But if we just walk away saying, "Wow, that was a mess," we haven't really learned anything. These slides is the most important one of all. It's the lesson learned. And these are the takeaways that IT professionals, the government officials, and the business leaders should remember so they don't make the same mistakes. Okay, first of all, technology alone cannot guarantee success. This is the lesson number one, and it's so important. IBM had great technology, they had the experience, they had proprietary databases, but none of that mattered because technology is just a tool. A tool is only as good as the people using it and the process around it, right? And in Pennsylvania's case, they had the technology, but they had weak management, poor planning, and bad testing. The technology could not save them from those problems. You need more than just good tools, you need good people, good processes, and good leadership. And then governance and leaderships are critical. Well, we've talked about this a lot. The government means having clear rules, clear roles, and clear accountability. Who is in charge? Who makes decisions? Who gets blamed when things go wrong? In Pennsylvania, no one was really in charge. The DLA didn't have experienced managers, they let the IBM self manage. There was no accountability, and when things went wrong, no one knew who to blame. And then the third lesson, over complexity increases risk. The UCMS project was huge. It has thousands of requirements. It had to work with old systems and new systems. It had to serve millions of people. It was incredibly complex. But there's the thing, the more complex they are, the more things can go wrong. It's like the difference between on a cycle and piloting a space shuttle. It's, you know, if you bike, you go on bike, something breaks, you might fall and scrape your knee. Just that, okay? But in space shuttle, something breaks, you might explode, something like that, okay? And the Carnegie Mellon report found that IBM software code was excessively complex that made it hard to test, hard to fix, and hard to understand. If they had kept things simpler, they might have fewer problems. Next one, the fourth lesson, incremental implementation is safer. This is really important concept in project management. Incremental implementation means building a launching system in small pieces rather than all at once. Pennsylvania tried to build a massive system at all at once, and they should have built it piece by piece, testing each piece truly before moving to the next. If they had done that, they might have caught problem earlier and avoided the catastrophic failure of phase 3. Instead, they launched phase 2 before it was ready, and they never ever finished phase 3. Incremental implementation would have never been much safer. And then the final lessons: organizational readiness matters. This means that, is the organization actually ready for a new system? Do they have the right people? Do they have the right skills? Do they have the right process? In Pennsylvania, the answer was no. The DLI didn't have enough staff to oversee the project. They didn't have the experienced project manager. They didn't have the clear requirements. They were not ready for the project of this size. So Pennsylvania was not ready. And because they were not ready, the project failed. Okay, one more time. Let's review the 5 lessons. Technology was not enough. You need people and process too. The strong leadership and clear rules are essentials. The complexity is dangerous. Build in pieces. Don't try to do everything at once. And make sure the organization is ready before you start. These lessons don't just apply to government IT project. They apply to any large project in any industry. If you remember nothing else from this case study, remember these 5 lessons. They might save your career someday. All right, so we reached the summary of this study case. Okay, let's wrap up the entire UCMS case study after looking all the facts, the goal and the challenge, the impact and the lessons. What can we conclude? Okay, first point. UCMS represents a partial success, not a complete solution. This is an interesting way to put it. They're not saying it was a total failure. They're saying it was a partial success. What does it mean? Well, remember Phase 1 and Phase 2, they actually did get implemented. The wage record system worked. The employer tax system eventually worked, even though it needed years to fix. Some parts of the project were successful, but partial success is not the same as complete success. Imagine you trying to work for some part, but they never got to complete integrated system they were promised. And the most important part, the claim processing system was never finished. So it's partial success, but that's not something to celebrate. And the second point is modernization goals have not been fully achieved. Remember the original goals: replace the old system, improve processing speed and accuracy, support reporting requirement, enhance the service. Have those goals been achieved? Well, partially yes, but fully no. And the old system is still being used for some things. Processing still faces delays, and then service is still inconsistent, claimants still struggle. The vision of the fully modern, efficient, user-friendly system has not become reality. And the last one, corrective actions are essentials to protect public funds and improve the service delivery. This is the call to actions. After all the problems, after all the waste, after all the suffering, something has to change. Corrective actions means fixing what's broken. It means strengthening the governance, means improving oversight, finishing the unfinished business, and they need to do this for 2 reasons. First of all, to protect the public funds. to improve the service delivery. And that's what the Pennsylvania needs to do. They need to call the the fixer, the plumber, whether that's better management, more funding on new vendors, and finally fix the leak. Okay, so the project, yes, is partially successful, but that's not good enough. And the original goal were not fully achieved, and they need to take actions to fix the problems and protect both money and the people. Okay, so this study case is cautionary tale. It shows us that even with good intention and big budgets, project can go terribly wrong. But it also shows that we can learn from mistakes and the lessons we've discussed today, like the governance, the complexity, the incremental implementation, the organizational readiness. Those are the tools we have to prevent failures like this in the future. And as you go forward in your careers, whether you're working in government, business, or technology, remember the UCMS project. Remember what went wrong and use those lessons to build systems that actually work for the people who depend on them. Thank you so much, everyone, to keep watching until the end of the explanation of this study case. I will see you in the next interesting study case. Goodbye.